The governor of the state joined Hollywood celebrities and more than 125,000 Southland residents for the grand opening.
Lindbergh came here, and he surveyed the field, and everybody was just, oh, we felt so good because he said that this was an idyllic airport because it was sheltered by the mountains over there and over here, and so it was just a perfect place for an airport. So Glendale, all of Glendale felt very proud that Lindbergh had singled our airport out.
One of the investors in the new airport was Jack Maddox, who owned a Lincoln car dealership and a Ford tri-motor passenger airplane. Jack Maddox thought a passenger airplane might be a nice supplement to his earnings as a car salesman. Standing in the lobby of the new terminal building, Amelia Earhart discusses the airline route with Mrs. Jack Maddox, perhaps hoping that her husband wouldn't give up his day job. The airline was called Transcontinental Air Transport, and as you could guess by the name, the idea was to offer regularly scheduled passenger service coast to coast. On July 8, 1929, everyone was back in Glendale. Congressmen, the governor, the mayors of Los Angeles and Glendale, movie stars, 125,000 spectators. 5 months after it opened, Grand Central Air Terminal saw the departure of the very first regularly scheduled coast-to-coast airline service. In support of the temperance movement, Mary Pickwick christened the Ford Tri-Motor with a bottle of grape juice. Shortly thereafter, the airliner took off with America's most famous aviator, Charles Lindbergh, at the controls. With seat backs and tray tables in the full upright position, the first coast-to-coast passengers left Glendale, hung a right at Sunland, and headed east. At the same time, westbound passengers were leaving New York by train.
There's a new kind of spirit in the air each day when this train departs. It's like those moments before a smart deluxe liner sets sail for Paris and the Riviera. And at exactly 6:05 p.m., the Airway Limited, first and only train of its kind in the world, with a direct airline connection, pulls out with its air-minded guests.
It was an insane scheme by today's standards. Passengers left New York's Penn Station, traveled by train all night, then caught an airplane to continue the journey by air the next morning.
The big tri-motor all-metal plane is ready and waiting, equipped like a Pullman car. Its roomy cabin is well lighted and heated in wintertime. The field rushes by. Then all is flowing smoothness.
That night, they got back on a train. The next morning, back on an airplane. The entire journey took 2 full days. Obviously not a trip you'd want to take with the kids.
Now aboard our plane, a dainty and satisfying luncheon is served along. 5,000 feet in the air.
Actually, it was very prudent to avoid night flying in those days. The 16-passenger tri-motors never flew higher than 5,000 feet, and with several mountain ranges in the way, the train was a better idea.
You are nearing the end of your trip. And so...
This promotional film never mentioned Glendale. The journey was touted as New York to Los Angeles, but Los Angeles didn't have a suitable airport. As this timetable clearly shows, the West Coast terminal was Grand Central.
Plane from New York and the East, arriving 4:20 on time.
Ironically, one of the sites that original investors considered, then rejected, was Mines Field in Inglewood. Much later, Mines would become LAX. But in 1929, Glendale was the West Coast terminal for all major transcontinental airlines. And Jack Maddox's airline, which started with one plane, grew to many planes, and would eventually change its name to TWA.
Growing up in the mid-1930s, I can recall TWA Airlines, the Western Airlines, and American Airlines all getting their start on the West Coast here at the Grand Central Air Terminal.
Many longtime residents of Glendale remember the days when Grand Central Air Terminal was the jewel in the crown of the Jewel City. It was also a pretty perfect place if you were a kid back in those days. Grand Central seemed connected to everybody and everything that made the news.
That plane flew all the way across this country since yesterday afternoon.
And it made a 3-point landing, too.
There was a lot of activity, a lot of famous people that came in and out of this terminal, a lot of them that flew in and out of this terminal. Amelia Earhart, Charles Lindbergh, to name a couple, a lot of movie stars. In the early days, Wallace Berry kept a plane here. I had a friend whose father worked in the hangar that housed Howard Hughes' plane that he flew around the world. We would come down and see him, and he would let us look around the hangar. And when Howard Hughes made his trip around the world, this whole area was jammed with people and cars because he used Glendale as the finishing point on his round-the-world trip.
When I was a little boy, maybe 10 or less, and my grandmother had sent us a note saying she was going to come flying from San Diego to Glendale. And she came on a Ford Tri-Motor, a great big silver plane, 3 big engines. And down it came, and out stepped my grandmother. She must have been 80 years old at the time. And we were really amazed that she would fly, and she was the first one in our family who had ever been in a plane.
I was 10 years old, and I remember the Ford Tri-Motor came in, and to more or less advertise it, they were flying the people around for a penny a pound. And I weighed about 100 pounds at that time, and I remember for $1 I got about a 10-minute flight around Glendale.
We used to come down here occasionally I think on a Thursday afternoon to look for the mail plane to come in. And it would come in and land, and we would be over there on I guess it's the west end of the airport, watching the thing land. And it was a plane that had bags of mail in it. That was a big event.
The terminal building, the windows you see up above here was a restaurant that occupied the second floor of the terminal building. It was one of Glendale's better dining areas. The arches have been filled in. They were actually glass arches and a breezeway. Runway, of course, was behind the terminal, and it was fenced in. As I recall, they had about 3 openings that went onto the field, and they had covered entrances, and they were on a roller or on a track that they could roll out to the plane to give more protection for the people in the foul weather.
Grand Central Air Terminal was, in every way, state-of-the-art. It featured modern communications with facilities for both day and night operations.
TAT Maddox radio ground station answering westbound plane.
Westbound plane reporting position. We are now passing over Granville.
Pilots could get the latest weather information from all across the country.
And as I can recall from the tower, they had a handheld light that they would flash at the end of the runway as the pilot was waiting to take off with a green light. And that was his okay, it was clear to take off.
All clear, George. Watch for the light.
There was even an officers' club to provide hospitality for visiting pilots. It was rumored among locals that there were underground tunnels leading from the Elegant Club to the Los Angeles River to allow for a quick escape in case of a raid. Prohibition was on, and it was well known that alcohol was readily available at the club.
Hiya, Paul. We're expecting you at the club, you know. Well, Luke, I'll be there.
This is where the passengers and the people that were going to board the airplanes would come in. And they would come around the circular drive, stop here, and go into the terminal and the ticket counters through this door.
We've got plenty of time.
As you enter the terminal, on the be the west wall was the ticket offices and the baggage area.
Our plane, huh?
In a few minutes, we'll be out of all this mess.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Gotta be in New York tomorrow. It means a lot of money to me. You're gonna fly it there. Not me. What do you mean, not you?